Chapter 2175. Black words flashed in the sky of the divine ruins world. Countless cultivators seemed to have sensed it and looked up. The words were not big, but they were easily reflected in everyone's eyes. As they breathed, the words flickered. The Xan Yuan calendar was a calendar that had never been recorded in the history of the divine ruins world. The illusory god palace was a mysterious place that no one had ever heard of. Everyone was puzzled and looked at the sky in a daze. However, they seemed to have been inspired by something and gradually yearned for it. It seemed that after that, something was summoning the world. Family. When Jun Jiuqing returned to the family Yi, the guards at the gate immediately bowed. Greetings, family head. Their voices and expressions were extremely respectful. When their eyes swept over the half-folded divine vulture standing on Jun Jiuqing's shoulder, a deep sense of fear flashed across their eyes. A few months ago, they did not treat Jun Jiuqing like this. In a short period of time, Jun Jiuqing had taken over the position of family head and had the entire family Yi firmly in his hands. Anyone with a brain in the family Yi knew how to face this young family head with a different surname. Jun Jiuqing nodded and was about to walk in. Suddenly, he sensed a strange movement in the sky and looked up. The two guards also looked up curiously, their faces filled with shock and confusion. Why were there words in the sky? Jun Jiuqing narrowed his eyes slightly, but he did not seem surprised. After a moment, he retracted his gaze. Pass down the order. All the elders of the family Yi are to head to the hall immediately. There's something important to discuss. The two guards did not know what was going on, but they immediately obeyed. After Jun Jiuqing left, the two of them looked at each other. Something big was going to happen in the divine ruins world. Nan family. The current Nan family had fallen apart. Only Nan Jinshu, who used to be one of the elders, managed to rise to the position of family head. He was Nan Yifan's younger cousin, and had coveted the position of family head for many years. Unfortunately, his strength was always a bit weaker than Nan Yifan's. It was only after Nan Yifan died and the clan fell into chaos that he finally got the chance. After the calamity of the Peach Blossom Cove, the Nan family had suffered heavy losses. They were no longer comparable to the Nan family at their peak. However, the Nan family had been passed down for thousands of years after all. They still had a certain foundation. Nan Jinshu had been ordering everyone in the Nan family to recuperate and recover their vitality. Even if they couldn't be as high and mighty as before, they could still barely contend with some of the first-rate families. Of course, Yuntian Tower was an exception. Nan Jinshu was stunned for a long time when he saw the line of words in the sky. Then, he seemed to have thought of something and became excited. The rumors about the ancestors are actually true? Phoenix God Mountain. When Yi Zhao returned, he did not deliberately hide his whereabouts. In fact, the matter of him and Mao Zhen heading to the Crimson Moon Desert together had already spread among the two great ancient divine beast clans. Therefore, there was no need to hide anymore. He went straight to the Phoenix Temple. When Elder Yu saw him, he was immediately delighted. "Patriarch, you're back. How's Dumpling?" The news had spread like wildfire outside. He was basically certain that Dumpling was safe. However, he could only be at ease when he asked about this matter properly. Yi Zhao shook his head. Someone forcefully opened her sixth meridian. Fortunately, Shangguan Yu broke through to the Supreme God realm in time and helped her recover a lot. After recuperating for a period of time, there should be no major problems. Elder Yu was shocked. He almost thought that he had misheard. Someone forcefully opened her meridian? How is that possible? Who in the world has such ability? Also, that's not right. Dumpling's talent is already rare. She opened her fifth meridian at such a young age. What was the person who forced her to open her meridian by force? Yi Zhao took a deep breath. He put one hand behind his back and frowned. That's what I'm worried about. We've encountered some trouble in the Crimson Moon Desert, but we haven't found out who the mastermind is. Elder Yu's lips moved. His expression changed, and huge waves surged in his heart. Yi Zhao went with Mao Zhen. If he guessed correctly, something must have happened to Zichen. The two of them working together could be considered invincible. However, even they couldn't find anything? He felt a strong sense of uneasiness. He felt that there was something strange about this that he couldn't explain. Yizhao said, "Send more people later. You must investigate thoroughly. Don't let go of any clues." "I'll go now." Elder Yu had just turned around. Before he walked out of the square in front of the Phoenix Shrine, he suddenly felt something strange in the sky. He looked up. What he saw immediately caused him to be startled. Patriarch. Yizhao had already looked up. That line of words flickered silently in the sky and was clearly reflected in everyone's eyes. "Patriarch, this is..." Elder Yu was about to ask something when he saw Yizhao suddenly turn around and quickly enter the Phoenix Shrine. At the same time, the barrier outside the Phoenix Shrine flickered, and the pressure became even stronger. Elder Yu's heart trembled. What is the Patriarch planning? He stood in place and pondered for a while. Then he walked toward Fenghuang Valley. As expected, many people in the clan were looking at the words that suddenly appeared with different expressions. Elder Yu's heart tightened. Yizhao entered the Phoenix Shrine. He was silent and hurried along the way. Finally, he arrived before the huge mural in the middle of the shrine. Ancestor. He stared deeply at the figure of the ancestor who emerged from the fire. The illusion god palace's heavenly gate is finally opening again. The shrine was so quiet that one could hear a pin drop. The figure on the mural remained silent. Peach Blossom Cove. This line of words appeared above their heads at the same time. Tang Ku, who had just finished refining the second batch of divine artifacts, stopped and looked up. He furrowed his brows, but they quickly smoothed out. Su Li also stopped and asked curiously, "What's that? Where is the illusion god palace? The heavenly gate is a gate?" Tang Ku looked at her and shook his head. "When the time is right, everything will be solved. Do you still want to continue?" He was asking about the artifact refinement. Su Li paused and nodded. "That's true. Then let's continue." The two of them had always been neck and neck, so she had always wanted to see who was the better one. As for the sudden appearance of the words, just as Tang Ku said, what would come would come. When the time was right, everything would be known. Everyone heard the conversation between the two and felt conflicted. Little Mina stretched lazily, squinted his eyes, and muttered weakly, "That's right." The two of them have already refined 13 venerable divine artifacts each. Why do they still want to continue? After looking at the mural day and night for so long, even if they weren't tired, she was. She walked to Xin Yi's side. "Big brother, can I go to sleep?" Xin Yi's expression was indifferent. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 2176. Little Hachi pursed her lips. She knew it. Big brother definitely wouldn't let her slack off on such an occasion. "But I'm really sleepy." She leaned forward and pointed at her eyes. "Big brother, I haven't slept for so long. The dark circles under my eyes are a lot heavier." Cinny didn't even look at her. "You can sleep here." Little Hachi, after so many years, Big brother was still as heartless as ever. She knew she shouldn't have counted on him. Little Hachi wrinkled her nose. "Fine, I'll sleep." She took a few steps back and bumped into someone. She turned around and saw that it was Yan Qing. At this moment, she was so tired that she was about to go berserk. When she saw that it was Yan Qing, she didn't think too much and patted Yan Qing's shoulder. "Lord Yan Qing, let me sleep on your shoulder for a while." Besides, Yan Qing was one of Rong Xiu's people. He wouldn't be as scared of Big Brother as Sanson and the others. Thinking about it this way, he was indeed the most reliable person. Little Hachi actually felt a little happy at this thought. As she spoke, her soft and boneless hand had already silently climbed onto Yan Qing's arm. She narrowed her eyes and was about to lean her head over. At this moment, Yan Qing suddenly grabbed her wrist and took half a step away. Little Hachi's head missed and she instantly sobered up. She looked at Yan Qing blankly. Yan Qing's voice was calm. "Miss Little Hachi, this isn't appropriate." "Little Hachi, what's not appropriate?" Yan Qing paused. "It's not appropriate in any way. How could a young lady casually lean on a man's shoulder and fall asleep?" He didn't mind, but there were so many people watching. It wasn't good for her. Miss Little Hatchie, if you're really sleepy, why don't you go back to sleep? Little Hatchie widened her eyes. But Big Brother won't let me go back to sleep. Didn't you hear it? Yanqing glanced at Sun Yi. Actually, it didn't matter if Little Hatchie stayed or not. She didn't know why Sun Yi refused to let her go back. Seeing how unmoved Sun Yi was, it seemed like he wouldn't change his mind. This was the matter of the 13th year, so he couldn't say much. If I don't sleep now, I'll really die. Little Hatchie pursed her red lips and stretched out a finger to poke Yanqing's shoulder. Are you made of paper? You can't even let me lean on you? I want to sleep, I want to sleep. Her fingers, which were painted with delicate nail polish, were as slender as a scallion. She tapped on his shoulder again and again. I poked and prodded. Yanqing finally caught her hand. Go to sleep. Little Hatchie's brain was already confused. When she heard that she could sleep, she immediately became happy. Her head tilted and she fell over. But this time, they still didn't reach their destination. Yanqing reached out and held her forehead. Little Hatchie blinked. Yanqing waved his hand, and a ball of light that flickered with a faint blue light appeared in front of him. You can go in and sleep. Yanqing said. There are bedding inside. Don't worry, everything is new. As for why he had this kind of thing, it had to be traced back to a long time ago. His master ordered him to prepare it. He prepared a lot. Some were given to his master to use, and the rest was left with him. Little Hatchie was speechless. She was completely awake now. No need. Little Hatchie took a deep breath. Yanqing frowned slightly. Aren't you very sleepy? Don't worry, it's an independent small space inside, and there's a barrier. Little Hatchie closed her eyes. She was afraid that if she saw Yanqing's face again, she wouldn't be able to resist scratching a few beautiful blood flowers. I don't like this color. Little Hatchie gritted her teeth and said. Yanqing thought for a moment and asked hesitantly, then, change it to powder? You're the one who wants to sleep with powder. Your whole family is sleeping with powder. Little Hatchie finally lost her temper. After saying that fiercely, she turned around and left. Not only was she not sleepy now, but she was also very energetic. At the side, 13 asked nervously. Sister 8 seems to be angry, Shifeng said. When has she not been angry when talking to Lord Yanqing? 13, that's true. After so many years of experience, the 13U sect knew very well that when Little Hatchie was angry, they must not talk to her. It was best if they didn't even look at her. Hence, they looked away in unison and looked at Tang Ku and Su Li. Yu-Gi-Oh! It's such a blessing to watch two seniors refine artifacts. Sanson, that's right. I can still watch for another 100 years. Sun Yi finally spoke. Little Hatchie. Little Hatchie immediately pounced over with tears in her eyes. Big Brother. Did Big Brother finally change his mind? Could she go back to sleep? Sun Yi raised his chin and asked, do you know how many divine artifacts the two of you have refined up until now? Little Hatchie was stunned. I know. It's good that you know. Only then did Sun Yi give her a precious look. Seeing that you're very energetic now, we'll refine pills according to this number. As for the type of pills, you know in your heart. Little Hatchie's forehead twitched. She shouldn't have rejected Yanqing just now. Red Moon Desert. That line of words flickered with each breath. Snow kept falling from the sky, and the surrounding snow became thicker and thicker, but it avoided this ice lake. After a moment, the purple scale flew back to Chu Liuyue's hand. She looked down and saw that the light on it was much dimmer than before. Chu Liyue slowly clenched her fists. They're not here. Her brows were tightly knitted together, and her heart felt like it was being squeezed by something. Cold snowflakes and ice particles kept blowing on her head and face. There was already a layer of sparkling ice and snow on her eyelashes. They are in the Illusion God Palace. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 2177. However, what kind of place was the Illusory God Palace? She had no idea. Right now, the connection between her and Debeo had been severed. The only thing that could still be maintained was this piece of scale armor. But from the situation of this scale armor, Debao's situation was also very worrying. Chu Luiwe looked around. Between heaven and earth, there was nothing at all. She suddenly thought of the pavilion in the sky from before. Could it be the illusory god palace? She muttered under her breath. At this time, the words on the ice lake slowly disappeared. Rong Xiu held her hand. We can't stay here for long. Let's go back first and discuss this matter. Chu Liwei was about to nod when she suddenly thought of something. Wait first. She broke free from Rong Xiu's hand and flew towards the ice lake. Rong Xiu frowned and was about to go over when he heard Chu Liwei say, Don't come over first. Rong Xiu stopped in his tracks. Nan Su Huai looked at Rong Xiu and also stopped, but his face was still full of worry. What are you doing? This place is very dangerous. You must be careful. Everything here was very strange, and it really made people worried. Chu Luiwe nodded. Thank you, Master. I know what to do. Swish. A rainbow light flashed. Scarlet Heaven's sword appeared in her hand. She held it tightly and stood on the ice lake. The cold wind from the snowy plains blew the ice and snow, rolling up the corners of her clothes. Her hair fluttered in the wind, but a thin layer of frost quickly condensed on the ends of her hair. It could be seen that the temperature here was very low and the weather was very cold. Chu Luiwe looked at the ice below her feet. The originally clear lake water had already frozen into a thick layer of ice. It was sparkling and translucent, making people unable to see the scene inside. In fact, she had always been very curious about what was under the lake water. She had stayed in the Red Moon Desert for a long time and had seen Debao and the others walk out of the lake several times. But she had never gone down herself. She had always been smart and quick-witted. She could tell that Debao and the others didn't really want to talk about these things, so she didn't ask anything about it. However, at this moment, a strong sense of curiosity surged from the bottom of her heart. Since Debao and the other two were no longer here, she wanted to see what secrets were hidden below. She quickly circulated the force in her body and poured it all into Scarlet Heaven's sword. A sword hum rang out. On Scarlet Heaven's sword, scarlet gold and transparent flames intertwined and burned fiercely. Chu Luiwe held his sword with both hands and raised it high. Then he swung it down viciously. Clang! The sharp edge of the sword cut into the ice, producing a crisp sound. Crack! A crack quickly spread out on the ice surface. At the same time, the flames on the Scarlet Heaven sword quickly followed the crack in an instant. The blazing heat began to melt the layer of ice. More and more tiny cracks appeared and spread in all directions. Chu Luiwe held her breath and stared intently. However, at this moment, the snow and ice falling from the skies suddenly gathered in this direction. Snowflakes fell on the flames and cracks. The flames gradually extinguished, and the cracks gradually recovered. The crack that Chu Luiwe had slashed with all her strength was easily restored to its original state. How could this be? Chu Luiwe looked at the smooth ice surface and almost couldn't believe her eyes. Now that she was a god, she didn't hold back in the sword just now. Even if it was a mountain, this sword could raise it to the ground. However, there was only a shallow crack on the surface of the ice. Even if she had thought of igniting the flames in advance, it was still futile. In less than 15 minutes, all traces on the ice surface had been erased. At a glance, it was clean. Even the rippling patterns didn't change in the slightest. Her sword, it didn't have any effect on it at all. Cold air came from all directions, piercing into her body like steel needles. A dazzling light flashed on her body and covered her with a layer of transparent and gorgeous soft armor. Only then did it expel the cold air. Chu Luiwe didn't believe it and slashed again. Clang! The moment the sword landed, a Xian formation suddenly appeared under the ice surface. A wave of indescribable pressure spread out from the top. Chu Luiwe was the first to bear the brunt. When she sensed the aura, she already knew that something was wrong. Immediately after, a crisp cracking sound was heard. Crack! A look of horror flashed across her face. That was because the Scarlet Heaven sword in her hand broke the moment it was enveloped by the light of the Xian formation. She didn't even think and immediately retreated. A ray of light wrapped around the Scarlet Heaven Sword and came over. Rong Xiu immediately attacked. A ray of golden light flickered and quickly passed by Chu Lui's palm. The Scarlet Heaven Sword was instantly cut in half. Almost at the same time, the broken sword body shattered into countless tiny pieces. The Scarlet Heaven Sword was completely destroyed. Chu Lui lowered her head and saw that there was only a broken sword hilt left in her hand. She immediately sucked in a breath of cold air. Rong Xiu went forward and grabbed her waist, bringing her away from the lake. Then, he took a step forward and protected her behind him. On the ice surface, the Xian formation gradually appeared and flickered. Rong Xiu's eyes that were as deep as the sea seemed to be gradually rippling. Nan Su Hui rushed over in a hurry. Are you all right? Chu Liwei shook her head and looked at the lake with a complicated gaze. Whose seal is that? Wonderful book house. Chapter 2178. It was a Xian formation and also a seal. It was extremely complicated, and its pressure was extremely strong. She had been in the Red Moon Desert for many years, but she had never seen this seal before. But strangely, for some reason, she felt that the aura on it was somewhat familiar. She thought of that. The dangerous moon was approaching. What secrets were hidden below? There are layers of restrictions below. I'm afraid we can't go in. Rong Xiu said. Chu Luiwen nodded and summoned a long sword. It was the venerable divine weapon that she had refined with the Star Darkness sword embryo. Half of it was pure gold, the other half was dark green. It was especially bright against the white snow. With a thought, a flame surged out and melted the broken hilt of the Scarlet Heaven Sword. The artifact spirit was refined, and under the guidance of the flame, it fused with the new sword. The Star Darkness sword embryo is forged, so it should be called the Star Darkness sword. The sword was shining brightly, and its sword chi was sharp. It was indeed a pity that the Scarlet Heaven Sword was destroyed. Fortunately, she had personally refined this Star Spectre sword, which was perfect. Chu Luiwei looked at Rong Xiu. Debao and the others are most likely trapped in the Illusion God Palace. We need to find that place quickly. Debao and the other two had been trapped in the Red Moon Desert for tens of thousands of years and had never left. But this time, the three of them had disappeared very suddenly. This made her feel very uneasy. Rong Xiu paused for a while and said, I know where the Illusion God Palace is. Tens of thousands of miles away. In a dark and cramped cell, Duga Mabao sat alone. His soft armor-like purple robe was damaged in several places, and his body was covered in blood. It seemed that he had just gone through an intense battle. After a while, a hoarse and rough voice came. Have you thought it through? Duga Mabao did not react as if he did not hear it. The voice chuckled. Tens of thousands of years of imprisonment and torture can't make you waver? Duga Mabao was still unmoved. His pale face was stained with dried dark red blood, which made him look even more haggard. But his back was straight like a pine tree in the snow, with a noble arrogance that went deep into his bones. This attitude seemed to make the other party a little angry. Duga Mabao, you're very stubborn. But have you thought about whether those two people are like you? If you don't relent, they'll have to suffer another day of torture. No matter what, they are friends who have accompanied you for 10,000 years. Can you really bear to leave them to die? Duga Mabao's eyebrows moved. That pair of demonic purple eyes flashed with a cold light. You don't dare to kill them. His voice was calm and firm. Every word was like a heavy hammer that smashed into the empty and dark cage. The voice quieted down. After a while, it said, I won. It's a pity that Lan Xiao has just refined his divine body, but compared to Diwu Zhangzi, he's still better. You know how painful it is to enter the illusionary god ocean without a divine body. After all, you've already experienced it tens of thousands of years ago, haven't you? That voice had a hint of smugness as if a prank had succeeded. It was cold and sinister, making one's heart tremble. Duga Mabao's hands curled up in his sleeves, and his voice turned colder. You'll be punished for breaking the contract. The other party sneered in disdain. Duga Mabao, you're the one who broke the contract first, aren't you? You've already broken the taboo by reconstructing your divine body. Lan Xiao is your man, so it's fine. But when Diwu chose to betray you, he should have known that this day would come. It seems like these 10,000 years of punishment didn't teach him enough of a lesson. The corners of Dugamabao's lips suddenly curled into an extremely faint arc. He betrayed you and is still stubborn to this day. Doesn't that mean that you're a failure? As soon as he finished speaking, a long whip viciously lashed Dugamabao's back in the darkness. His skin instantly split open. He groaned, and blood flowed out from the corner of his mouth. The mockery in his eyes became even more intense. The illusionary god palace's heaven gate is about to open. Everything will come to a conclusion. When that time comes, you'll know how foolish your actions today were. That voice lingered in the cage for a long time before finally dispersing. After confirming that the person had left, Dugamabao's body swayed, and he coughed violently. His mouth was filled with the thick smell of blood. After coughing for a while, he casually wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth. He placed his hands on his knees and continued to sit cross-legged, waiting. The heaven gate is about to open. You should be coming soon, right? A hint of worry flashed across his brows, but it quickly disappeared. You know. Chu Liyue's eyes flashed with deep shock. Why didn't you mention it before? Rong Xiu smiled faintly. You didn't ask before. I'm not the only one who knows about this place. Seniors Yi Zhao and Mao Zhen, as well as some first-rate families with thousands of years of history, should have heard of it. Chu Liyue came back to his senses. This is a place that exists in distant legends. It is said that tens of thousands of years ago, a mysterious place appeared in the world of divine ruins. It was called the Illusory God Palace. There, the energy of heaven and earth was abundant, resources were abundant, and experts were as common as clouds. More importantly, if one could enter and cultivate, it was very likely that one would break through the shackles of a god and become an even more powerful existence. But later on, for some reason, that place disappeared. Gradually, fewer and fewer people knew about it. There were also people who speculated that the Illusory God Palace was a divine relic. Every tens of thousands of years, it would descend to the world to cross that threshold and become a peerless expert. However, these are all rumors and no one has personally witnessed it. I just didn't expect it to appear now. Chu Liyue muttered, break through to a god. In the world of divine ruins, for nearly 10,000 years, no one had succeeded in breaking through that shackle. Dugamabao and the other two seemed to be such existences, but for some reason, they had been suppressed in the Red Moon Desert for tens of thousands of years, and the world didn't know of their existence. Suddenly, her pupils shrank. Wait, when that strange palace appeared here, there were rumors in the world of divine ruins that it was related to breaking through to a god. Could it be the Illusory God Palace? Or is it closely related to the Illusory God Palace? Rong Xiu paused. At that time, the fog was everywhere. Did you see the words on the plaque? Chu Liyue shook her head. In fact, because of the white fog, she didn't even get a glimpse of the palace. She only remembered the black jade square and the magnificent and towering circular wall. Perhaps, we will know everything when we reach the Illusory God Palace. Chu Liyue clenched the purple scale in her hand, pursed her lips, and nodded. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 2179. Chu Liyue and the other two stayed in the Red Moon Desert for about 10 days as they wanted to find some relevant traces. Unfortunately, he didn't get any useful information after all that effort. Instead, the weather was getting colder and the snow was getting thicker. Even they were starting to feel a bit tormented. Chu Liyue tried a few more times to split open the frozen lake surface, but all of her attempts ended in failure without exception. The seal floated quietly on the surface of the ice. It flickered lightly, but it also carried with it an unparalleled pressure. In the end, they could only choose to leave for now. According to Rong Xiu, Chu Liyue planned to return to Peach Blossom Cove first, then discuss the Illusion God Palace with Mao Zhen and Yi Zhao. Nan Su Huai wanted to go with them, but after careful consideration, he returned to Lingxiao College first. Chu Luiyue and Rong Xiu had just returned to the Yu residence when Sun Yi greeted them. "Master, Your Highness." Chu Luiyue asked as they walked in, "How are Tang Ku and Sir Su?" "When we came back, there wasn't much activity at Qingshui Cliff." "Master, the two seniors just finished their competition and are resting in their residences." Chu Luiyue was a bit surprised. "Just now? They just finished?" Based on their refining speed, it shouldn't have taken that long, right? Sun Yi nodded and explained, "Yes. The two of them refined a lot of divine artifacts this time, so they finished very late." Chu Luiyue paused. "How many?" She remembered that Tang Ku and Su Li had said that they would give all the divine artifacts they refined to her. Sun Yi said, "The two of them refined 42 divine artifacts each, for a total of 84. Chu Luiyue's eyes widened. "How many did you say?" Sun Yi's expression was as calm as ever. "A total of 84 divine artifacts, and all of them are venerable divine artifacts. The two of you have already handed them over to this subordinate, and I'm just waiting for you to come back." As he spoke, he took out 2 yin and yang rings. These 2 yin and yang rings looked a bit different, and each had a small seal mark on it. The one on the left is Senior Tang Ku's, and the one on the right is Sir Su's. Sun Yi respectfully presented them with both hands. The two of them said that you must personally examine them and choose one that you like. Chu Luiyue. "I remember that they used the same materials. Then these, as you think, these are the same." This subordinate has observed the entire process, and the two of them are indeed equally matched. Chu Luiyue was speechless. She put away the 2 cosmos rings and checked them separately. Sure enough, both the quantity and the type were exactly the same. How were they to compete? Chu Luiyue looked at the 2 small cosmic rings in a daze. 84. Back then, how many of Yang, how many lives heaven? Now that the two of them were working together, they were able to refine so many in one go. It was truly terrifying. Recently, many families and clans in the world of divine ruins heard the news and sent letters to buy these divine artifacts. I didn't dare to act rashly, so I sent them to your study and waited for you to come back and personally review them. Chu Luiyue raised her eyebrows. They're quite fast. The news of Tang Ku and Sun Yi staying in Peach Blossom Dock had long spread, and the news of the two of them starting to refine artifacts together had spread like wildfire from the beginning. Who wouldn't be jealous of nearly 100 venerable divine artifacts? Who wouldn't be envious? All of a sudden, all the families and clans heard the news, hoping to trade for some from Peach Blossom Dock. King divine artifacts were already precious enough, let alone venerable divine artifacts. There were very few families like Family E and the Nan family. There's no need to read them. Reject all the letters. Chu Luiyue continued to walk in. On one hand, it was the goodwill of the two seniors, so it wasn't convenient to give it away. On the other hand, it was because of the illusory God Palace. Thinking of this, her expression froze. By the way, after we left, did anything unusual happen in the world of divine ruins? Sun Yi nodded. Yes. The illusion God Palace's heaven gate is about to open, and everyone in the world of divine ruins has already started to prepare. Chu Luiyue's heart skipped a beat. Everyone already knows? Sun Yi recounted the scene that day to her. At this point, all the cultivators in the world of divine ruins have already heard the news. Moreover, there's a rumor that as long as one can enter the illusion God Palace, they can break through to the supreme God level. So, everyone is ready to make a move. Chu Luiyue's heart suddenly sank. But did you find out who released the news? Sun Yi shook his head. Someone is secretly adding fuel to the fire, purposely stirring up this pool of water. It's already impossible to trace the source of the news. Chu Luiyue pursed her lips. If that was the case, the world of divine ruins would be in chaos. But they don't know where the illusion God Palace is. Even if they know, what can they do? Sun Yi frowned, and a complicated expression flashed across his eyes. An ominous feeling rose in Chu Luiyue's heart. Sun Yi said, "The bridge to the illusion God Palace has been built." Chu Luiyue was shocked. "What did you say?" Sun Yi said, "When night comes, you'll know what I mean." The waiting time was always unbearable. Chu Luiyue stood in the courtyard, staring at the sky. It was already evening, and there was still some time before the sky turned dark. She kept thinking about everything that had happened before, and vaguely felt like there was an invisible net covering her. It was like fate, and she couldn't break free. Night fell bit by bit. When the first star shone in the black velvet-like night sky, the bridge finally appeared. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 2180. In the thick night sky, a silver-arched bridge stretched across the sky. One end of the bridge connected to the distant horizon, while the other end extended into the sky, into the clouds, and connected to an unknown place. Grand, brilliant, gorgeous, and noble. Specks of light gathered together, forming a silver bridge that seemed to have substance. But upon closer inspection, those specks of light did not seem to be simple specks of light, but seemed to be engraved with some kind of pattern. But because it was too far away, it was impossible to see clearly for the time being. That bridge has appeared since the night that those words flickered in the sky of the divine ruins world. Chu Luiyue recalled Sun Yi's words, and countless thoughts flashed through his mind. In the beginning, it was just a ball of gathered light, born at the point where heaven and earth met. It was difficult to reach, and it did not sleep at all. But gradually, those rays of light spread out towards the sky, little by little forming the shape of a bridge. Until now, that bridge still appears every night and continues to extend. No one knows what it is, but everyone is certain that the end of the bridge must be the legendary illusory God Palace. The day the bridge is completely grafted is the day the heaven gate opens. Chu Luiyue stared at the bridge in the sky, and after a long time, he exhaled softly. Sun Yi's guess should be the guess of all the cultivators in the divine ruins world. Such a strange and beautiful scene was unfamiliar and novel to them. Humans were always curious about the unknown with fear. Even if they knew it was dangerous, they would still want to try it for themselves. This time was no exception. Moreover, behind that bridge was very likely to be a huge opportunity. Who wouldn't be tempted? Back then, when the new gate realm opened, it attracted so many people to go there, not to mention the current situation. Still looking at this? Rong Xiu walked out of the room and put a coat on Chu Luiyue. Chu Luiyue gathered his clothes, and after a moment of silence he asked, "Do you think that the place connected to is really the legendary illusory God Palace? If that was the case, then Dabao and the rest were there as well?" Rong Xiu held her hand. Perhaps it was because of the cold night wind, but her fingertips were also cold. Rong Xiu wrapped her hand in his palm and sensed that her body was gradually warming up before he said, "Don't worry. No one can say for sure. We'll only know when we get there." "That's true." Chu Luiyue turned to look at him. That pair of serene and deep phoenix eyes were calm and tranquil, reflecting two tiny figures of her. He whispered, "What are you thinking about?" His voice was low and gentle as usual. Chu Luiyue hesitated for a moment. "Rong Xiu, I feel like there's a hand pushing me over." Although she didn't know who was behind this, there was indeed an invisible hand that was slowly pushing her in this direction. The illusory God Palace definitely had some sort of connection with her. But she didn't know why, but she didn't have any memories related to it. Rong Xiu lowered his head and kissed her forehead. Don't be afraid. No matter where you go, I'll be with you. No matter the distance, life or death." Chu Luiyue's uneasy heart instantly calmed down. She raised her head slightly and kissed him. Before he could react, she rested her head on his shoulder and rubbed it gently. "I'm not afraid. I have you." "What? You invited Grandpa Mao Zhen over?" In another courtyard, Dumpling and Zichen were sitting face to face around a stone table. There were many fresh and juicy berries on the table. These were all specially selected by Sanson. Each and every one of them was a rare heavenly treasure. They were extremely effective in replenishing energy and healing injuries. They were originally for Zichen, but now they were all dumplings. At this moment, Dumpling was gnawing on a red fruit that was bigger than her fist. Hearing Zichen's words, she suddenly stopped and raised her head in shock and confusion. "They should be here tomorrow," Zichen said and glanced at her. Her little mouth was stained with red juice and a few white sesame seeds. A pair of black grape-like eyes blinked, full of confusion. "Raise your face," Zichen said. "What?" Dumpling asked curiously, but she still raised her face obediently. Zichen reached over and wiped the white sesame seeds off the corner of her mouth. "No one is fighting with you. Just eat slowly." Zichen withdrew his hand and said lightly. Dumpling realized that she was eating too happily and didn't know when she had eaten so much. She wiped her mouth and her hand was suddenly stained red. It was rare for her to feel a little embarrassed. "I don't know why, but recently I've been hungry." She looked at the fruit in her hand hesitantly and then looked at the half-empty plate on the table. It was all hers. It seemed that she had eaten a little too much. Zichen withdrew his gaze and his handsome face was expressionless. "Don't waste it." Dumpling heard this and felt a lot more at ease. She muttered as she ate. "Grandpa Patriarch also sent me a message saying that they will be here in 2 days. Strange, didn't they just go back not long ago? Why are they coming again?" Although she was young, she had followed Chu Luiyue to these 2 ancient mythological beast clans several times. Under normal circumstances, Mao Zhen and Yi Zhao would never appear at the same time. For so long, it had only happened twice. The first time was because of Rong Xiu and Chu Luiyue's wedding. The second time was because of her and Zichen's accident. But this time, is it because of that bridge? Dumpling raised her head and looked at the bridge in the sky. Zichen narrowed his eyes. "Probably. I don't know how that bridge appeared." Dumpling pouted and stuffed the last bit of fruit into her mouth. "I feel a little uncomfortable when I see it." Zichen frowned and looked at her. "Uncomfortable? What's the matter?" Dumpling shook her head. Her small mouth was full and her words were a little unclear. She raised her small hand and pointed at the bridge. "I don't know. Anyway, it's just..." Zichen reached out and pulled her hand over. He put 2 fingers together and placed them on her wrist. He separated a part of his power and probed into her body. After a round of examination, he did not find anything unusual. Because she had opened her 6th meridian, Dumpling's body was much better than before. Her power was also more abundant than before. If she were to say that she was uncomfortable, there was no reason for it. Dumpling looked at his serious face and immediately smiled. "I'm fine. Don't worry, I'm very healthy. Maybe I ate too much?" Zichen did not comment on her statement, but he did not continue to ask. "All right, since you're done eating, I'll go first." Dumpling clapped her hands and jumped down from the stool. Zichen raised his eyebrows slightly. "Go. Where to?" Wonderful Book House. Chapter 2181. Dumpling said in a crisp voice, "Of course I'm going back to sleep." Zichen paused. "Isn't there a place for you to sleep here?" During this period, Dumpling had been sleeping in the same room as him. Dumpling blinked. "But your injury has already healed." Zichen's injury had indeed healed very quickly. He had even removed all the gauze during the day. She walked over and held Zichen's hand, revealing his smooth wrist. She nodded. "It's all healed. Other than the skin color around the wound that looked a little different from the other parts, it had basically completely recovered." Zichen felt that his wrist was a little itchy. He quietly withdrew his hand and thought for a moment, as if he was deliberating. "I thought it would be a while before Master came back, so..." Dumpling was very clingy. Most of the time, she was clingy to Chu Luiyue, but this time, she and Rong Xiu did not bring the 2 of them with them when they left. He thought that Dumpling would not be willing to sleep on her own after her injury healed today, so he specially tidied up the room next door. But, unexpectedly, "You can go back if you want. Although she might be a little tired from this trip, she should be fine with the holy sun around." As Zichen spoke, he stood up and was about to go back to the room. Dumpling, however, instantly felt a little conflicted. That's right. Rong Xiu was also there. She jogged a few steps and caught up with Zichen. She looked up and asked, she raised her head and asked, "Zichen, do you think it's inappropriate for me to go back now?" It was not that she had a high level of self-awareness, but that she had learned her lesson too many times. She did not want to be thrown out by someone again. Zichen stopped in his tracks and looked at the sky with a calm expression. It's fine. Although it's a little late, she has always doted on you the most. It's fine. Hearing what he said, Dumpling felt even more unsuitable. Then I can't go back even more. I'd better sleep here. After saying that, she ran in with her small feet. Zichen, can I sleep on the bed tonight? Dumpling turned around and stuck out her round head. Zichen nodded slightly. Yes. The next day, Maojin arrived at the Peach Blossom Cove. Without stopping to rest, he directly entered the Yu residence. When he passed through the barrier, Chu Luiwei already knew that he was coming and specially came out to welcome him. Senior Maojin. Chu Luiwei stepped forward. Sorry to trouble you to come again. Maojin waved his hand. His expression was no longer as relaxed as before, and there was a hint of seriousness between his brows. Let's talk inside. In the hall, Chu Luiwei and Maojin sat facing each other. Where's Rong Xiu? After taking a seat, Maojin looked around and did not see Rong Xiu. He could not help but feel a little strange. Chu Luiwei said, Yuemo just rushed back from the Yuntian Tower. He said that he had something to report, so I came over first. Maojin nodded and said, It's fine. He's wholeheartedly loyal to you. It's the same for him to talk to you. Chu Luiwei nodded with an apologetic look on his face. Actually, we should be the ones paying a visit this time. That's fine. In fact, even if I didn't hear from you this time, I was planning to come over. Maojin's expression was rarely serious. This made Chu Luiwei tense up as well. I heard that Nan Suhuai was here. Did you guys go to Lingxiao College? Chu Luiwei shook his head and briefly explained the matter. He included the disappearance of Debeo and the others. It was just a few words, but it made Maojin's expression even more serious. So, those people are no longer in the Red Moon Desert, but in the illusory God Palace? He had already guessed it before, but Chu Luiwei didn't say anything, so he didn't ask too much. Now it seemed that those people's identities were indeed extraordinary. However, now wasn't the time to think about this. Whether it's true or not, we have to go to the illusory God Palace to take a look, Chu Luiwei said. Maojin sighed. The heaven gate of the illusory God Palace is about to open. The entire Divine Ruins world is restless. However, this trip is too dangerous, so I'm here to tell you. Don't be impatient. Chu Luiwei's heart skipped a beat. Senior Maojin, you seem to know something about the illusory God Palace? Maojin smiled bitterly. Not really, but we have some connections. The ancestor of the great phoenix dragon race died in the illusory God Palace. Chu Luiwei didn't expect him to say such words. He was shocked. This doesn't seem to be the case. You said it yourself. Those are all rumors. Maojin patted the armrest of the chair and sighed. Actually, only the great phoenix dragon race's clan leader knows about this. This matter is of great importance and is extremely confidential. If the heaven gate of the illusory God Palace wasn't about to open, I wouldn't have revealed this matter. Chu Luiwei thought of the coiling dragon pillar in the Great Void Temple. Even though there was only a trace of the great phoenix dragon ancestor's aura left in it, it was still powerful and awe-inspiring. From this, one could see how powerful that person was when he was at his peak. It was rumored that he died naturally. Who knew that it was related to the illusory God Palace? In fact, it's not just the great phoenix dragon race. Maojin looked at Chu Luiwei with a complicated expression. The one from the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan is the same. He suddenly paused as if he thought of something and frowned. The hall was silent. Chu Luiwei was a little stunned. Even? Even what? From Maojin's words, could it be that the ancestor of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan had an even more? Why isn't Yizhao here? Maojin suddenly asked. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 2182. Chu Luiwei felt a little strange. Senior Zhao should be here soon, right? Have you sent him the news? Maojin asked. Chu Luiwei nodded in confusion. Of course. I sent the news to both of you at the same time. Peach Blossom Cove was quite far from Phoenix God Mountain and Divine Dragon Island. However, this wasn't a problem for Yi Zhao and Mao Zhen. With their speed, they would arrive in less than a day. However, Mao Zhen was faster than expected. As for Yi Zhao, it didn't seem to matter if he was a little late. Why did Mao Zhen look a little worried? Senior Yi Zhao followed me back to Peach Blossom Cove and just left not long ago. I think he will be a little late this time, right? Mao Zhen gradually frowned. No, he knows the importance of this matter. Logically speaking, he should be here before me. Why isn't he here yet? He looked outside, but there was no movement at all. Chu Luiwei gradually felt a little uneasy. Mao Zhen was a forthright person. If he hadn't really encountered something troublesome, he definitely wouldn't have such a reaction. And his worry for Yi Zhao didn't seem to be without reason. Wait a little longer. Perhaps he will be here soon. Chu Luiwei said. Senior Mao Zhen, you said that we shouldn't rush to the illusory god palace. Is it because something happened to the great Phoenix Dragon clan's ancestor there? Mao Zhen nodded and then shook his head. Sort of, but not completely. There are some things that I can't explain to you clearly now. Since Yi Zhao is here, you will know after listening. At this moment, Sin Yi suddenly came in from outside in a hurry. Chu Luiwei saw that his expression was a little abnormal, and his heart skipped a beat. Master, something happened to the meteor sect. Sin Yi walked in and handed over a black feather with both hands. Chu Luiwei immediately stood up and walked over. He took the black feather in his hand. It was still stained with blood. Chu Luiwei was very familiar with this aura. This is the feather of the legendary three-eyed eagle that Shiru contracted. Her brows were tightly knitted together. Sin Yi explained, just now, someone brought this feather over, but before I could ask about it, that person had already breathed his last. This subordinate recognizes him. He is one of the elders who accompanied Shiru to the Red Moon Desert. Chu Luiwei immediately asked, where is he? Sin Yi shook his head. He was poisoned. Half an hour after his death, he turned into a pool of blood. What a vicious method. Did you find out what kind of poison it was? Little Hachi has already gone there, but whether or not we can find out is still unknown. Did that person leave any message? Not at all. When he came, he was already mute. Chu Luiwei's heart trembled. What kind of person would do such a vicious thing to the Flying Star sect? Moreover, this method was truly powerful. No matter what, the Flying Star sect was still a first-rate family in the Divine Ruins world. According to Chu Luiwei's understanding, they did not have any deep grudges with anyone. Logically speaking, it was impossible for them to attract such a disaster. Those who had gone to the Red Moon Desert with Shiru were basically all venerable god experts. What kind of power could force them into such a miserable state? Chu Luiwei kept the feather. Let's go to Little Hachi. She had just taken half a step when she turned back to look at Mao Zhen with some hesitation. Mao Zhen immediately said, I'll go with you. Chu Luiwei's group quickly arrived at the city gate. At this moment, Little Hachi was standing there with her arms crossed. She was carefully staring at a pool of dark red blood on the ground. Little Hachi. Chu Luiwei quickly went up to her. When Little Hachi heard the voice, she raised her head and looked over. However, at this moment, her delicate and beautiful face was dyed with a trace of worry. Chu Luiwei walked closer and looked at the ground. The pool of blood had already dried up. All that was left was a patch of dark red blood and a faint stench. But did you notice something? Little Hachi shook her head in defeat. No. She was good at these things and had seen all kinds of strange poisons. However, she really could not recognize it this time. Chu Luiwei bent down to take a look. This smell was somewhat familiar. She seemed to have smelled it somewhere before. However, she could not recall where she had smelled it before. Chu Luiwei frowned slightly. You residents. Dumpling was still sleeping on the bed. Zichen had already woken up early in the morning. When he saw Dumpling kicking the blanket away restlessly, he got up and walked over to her. Just as he covered her with the blanket, she turned over and kicked it away. Her foot almost landed on Zichen's face. His face darkened. He grabbed her little white foot and stuffed it under the blanket. However, Dumpling began to struggle uneasily again. Zichen was about to speak when he suddenly saw Dumpling frowning. There seemed to be tears at the corners of her eyes. There was panic in her eyes. Was she having a nightmare? He paused and gently patted Dumpling's face. Dumpling, wake up. Dumpling? Dumpling seemed to have fallen into a deep nightmare. Instinctively, she hugged his hand tightly. Tears kept rolling down from the corners of her eyes. Crystal clear teardrops fell on the pillow, quickly wetting the pillow. Zichen furrowed his brows, feeling a bit worried. He helped her wipe away her tears. Dumpling suddenly woke up. Grandpa clan leader. She sat up abruptly and looked at Zichen. Her eyes were full of panic. Zichen, bad news. Grandpa Patriarch is in trouble. Zichen hugged her and patted her back. It's nothing. You just had a nightmare. Dumpling shook her head. No, it's real. It's real. Wonderful book house. Chapter 2183. Where's Ayu? I'm going to find Ayu. Dumpling was crying hard. Zichen's expression gradually became serious as he looked at her. He carried Dumpling in his arms and comforted her as he walked outside. Dumpling, don't cry. I'll take you to her. Dumpling hugged his neck and leaned over his shoulder. She nodded while sobbing. Her little body was still sobbing. Zichen's brows were tightly furrowed as he quickly walked outside. At first, he also thought that Dumpling was having a nightmare, but looking at her behavior, it really didn't seem like it. Could it be that something really happened? Zichen carried Dumpling and soon arrived at the city gate. Chu Luwe seemed to sense something and turned around, just in time to see the two of them. What's wrong with you, Dumpling? What's wrong? Seeing Dumpling's red eyes, Chu Luwe's heart immediately ached. Ayu! Dumpling opened her arms, and Chu Luwe took her into his arms and comforted her. What's wrong? What happened? Chu Luwe kissed Dumpling gently on the face. Dumpling, don't be afraid. Ayu is here. She looked at Zichen as she asked. Zichen shook his head. In fact, he wasn't sure what exactly happened. Dumpling's eyes were watery. Ayu, something happened to Grandpa clan leader. Chu Luwe was shocked. Something happened? What do you mean? Dumpling said. I was sleeping just now when I suddenly felt uncomfortable. After I woke up, I found that the aura that Grandpa clan leader left in my body was gone. And I can't sense the barrier of Phoenix God Mountain. As Dumpling spoke, sparkling and hot tears kept falling. Boo-hoo, she lay in Chu Luwe's arms and sobbed. Chu Luwe's heart sank. Ever since Dumpling went missing last time, Yizhao was afraid that something would happen to her again, so he paid extra attention to this aspect. That aura would not dissipate for no reason. In addition, the most important thing was that Tuanzi couldn't sense the enchantment of the divine Phoenix Mountain. As the young mistress of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan, Dumpling, who possessed the purest bloodline, had absolute control over that barrier. Dumpling, be good. Don't cry. Don't be afraid. Why don't you try again and see if you really can't contact him? Chu Luwe comforted. Dumpling held back her tears and shook her head. Seeing her like this, Chu Luwe knew that the situation must be bad. I knew something was wrong when Yizhao didn't show up after so long. Mao Zhen's expression was grave. I'm afraid something has happened to Phoenix God Mountain. Chu Luwe pursed his lips tightly. Phoenix God Mountain was the territory of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan. Hundreds of Crimson Gold Sky Phoenixes lived there. What exactly happened that made it so difficult for them to resist? We must go to Phoenix God Mountain as soon as possible. Chu Luwe said. Master, about the meteor sect, Little Hachi said hesitantly. Problems had arisen in both places, but they could only choose one place to go now. Chu Luwe knitted his brows. At this moment, Rong Xiu's voice was heard. I will personally lead some people to the meteor sect. Chu Luwe turned around and saw Rong Xiu walking toward them. You will personally go? Rong Xiu nodded. The meteor sect is a first-rate aristocratic family. The problem that forced them to this step is definitely not simple. I have already passed down the order. Yuntian Tower will also send some people to go with you. Chu Luwe felt a little relieved. She handed over the black feather. This is the only clue left behind by the meteor sex people. Rong Xiu received the black feather. He then looked at Mao Zhen and cupped his hands in greeting. His expression was serious. Rong Xiu has a presumptuous request. I hope that Senior Mao Zhen will agree to it. Mao Zhen seemed to have guessed what he wanted to say. She said, "You want me to go with you to the Phoenix God Mountain?" Rong Xiu nodded. "I know that this matter is a little difficult for you. Don't worry. I will go even if you don't ask." Mao Zhen heaved a long sigh. Her eyebrows also became serious. The relationship between the two ancient mythological beast clans was subtle. However, the other party couldn't stay out of trouble at a critical moment. Rong Xiu felt a little relieved. He walked over and embraced Chu Luiyue. Then he kissed her forehead. "Be careful." Chu Luiyue raised her eyes and looked at him. She nodded lightly. "You too." Chu Luiyue and the group quickly ran toward the Phoenix God Mountain. After a period of running, they finally arrived at the sea. Standing on the shore and looking at the sea in the distance, they could vaguely see the undulating mountain peaks. But for some reason, Chu Luiyue felt that something seemed to have changed when she came here previously. The defense here has all disappeared. Just as she was lost in thought, Mao Zhen's words instantly woke her up. That's right. Starting from this sea, all the areas that extended toward the Phoenix God Mountain were actually under the jurisdiction of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan. In the past, when they came here, they would feel a strong divine pressure even if they were just standing here. But now, there was nothing. Mao Zhen said in a low voice, "I didn't restrain my aura. Logically, the Phoenix God Mountain should have sensed it. Someone would immediately come out and stop me. But no." A deathly silence ensued. Between heaven and earth, there was only the sound of the wind blowing across the sea. The sound of waves hitting the reefs echoed continuously. Chu Luiyue felt increasingly uneasy. "Dumpling, let's go and take a look." Dumpling nodded with reddened eyes. Then she waved her hand. Above the sea, a reddish-gold ice bridge quickly formed. Passing through the ice bridge, they quickly arrived in front of the Phoenix God Mountain's barrier. Until now, as the clan leader of the Great Phoenix Dragon Clan, Mao Zhen still did not feel any obstruction. This was enough to explain the problem. Ever since these two divine beast clans were born in ancient times, such a situation had never happened. Dumpling could not care less. She rushed forward and was about to open the barrier. However, that layer of translucent barrier seemed to be frozen and did not move at all. Dumpling suddenly widened her eyes. How can this be? Chu Luiyue's heart sank. Because of the purest bloodline, it was always easy for Tuanzi to control the boundary. She could open and close it whenever she wanted. This was the first time such a situation had happened. She walked forward and covered the barrier with her hand. It was cold to the touch. Soon, a layer of silver frost began to rapidly condense under her palm. Chu Luiyue's heart jumped and she immediately retracted her hand. However, there was already a palm-sized frost mark on the barrier. Looking at the layer of frost, Chu Luiyue's temples suddenly twitched. This was bang. Before she could figure it out, Tuanzi had already kicked at the boundary. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 2184. Bang. A muffled sound could be heard. However, there were no cracks on the barrier other than the rapidly condensing frost. This barrier was extremely sturdy. Even Dumpling's full-powered attack could not break it. Chu Luiyue looked at Mao Zhen. "Senior Mao Zhen, do you have any ideas?" Mao Zhen shook his head. This barrier is condensed with the bloodline power of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan. Once I make a move, the situation will only become more troublesome. After all, he was the clan leader of the Great Phoenix Dragon Clan. Chu Luiyue slowly clenched her fists. In that case, it will be extremely difficult to break this barrier. At this moment, a reddish-gold stream of light suddenly flew out from between Dumpling's brows. It was a long feather. Ancestor's golden feather? Chu Luiyue's heart skipped a beat. "Dumpling, why did you summon it?" Under normal circumstances, this ancestor's golden feather would only appear when Dumpling opened her meridians. Chu Luiyue could not be blamed for being too nervous. It was because the previous incident had left a deep impression on her. Every time she thought of Dumpling's hands bound by iron chains and covered in blood, her heart trembled faintly. Dumpling shook her head blankly. "It's not me." The ancestor's golden feather slowly floated forward and landed lightly on the barrier. In an instant, a shocking and vast pressure spread out from within. The frozen enchantment instantly melted. An entrance quickly appeared in front of them. It was the ancestor's golden feather that flew out and opened this barrier. Then, the ancestor's golden feather flew into the barrier, and Dumpling immediately followed. Chu Luiyue and the others followed closely behind and entered the Phoenix God Mountain. The moment they entered, a thick smell of blood drifted out from the air. Chu Luiyue knew that something was wrong and immediately looked up. She was instantly stunned by what she saw. As far as the eye could see, the mountain peak had collapsed, the forest had collapsed, and there were messy bloodstains everywhere. It was clear that they had just gone through an extremely bitter battle. Chu Luiyue's heart tightened as he looked at Dumpling. Dumpling bit her lips tightly and headed straight for the Phoenix Shrine. A bottomless pit appeared in the plaza in front of the Phoenix Shrine. Rocks tumbled down and dust scattered in all directions. The thick smell of blood drifted out from this place. The dark red, dried bloodstains were evidence of everything that had happened here. "Grandpa Chief!" Dumpling suddenly choked with sobs and shouted, throwing herself into a pile of rocks. She lifted the rocks and pulled out a scarlet gold feather that was stained with blood from the bottom of the pile. Her face and hands were stained with dust and blood, but she couldn't care less about herself. She just held the feather in her hands and cried. Chu Luiyue quickly rushed over. "Dumpling!" She held Dumpling in her arms and looked at the feather again. The aura on it indeed belonged to Zhao. Chu Luiyue's lips were tightly pursed. Zhao was the chief of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan. His strength was extremely tyrannical, and almost no one in the entire Divine Ruins could be his match. Who was it that hurt him? And who destroyed this place to this extent? She took a few steps forward and came to the edge of the deep pit. She looked down. A familiar gloomy aura surged up from below. Chu Luiyue's heart suddenly felt like it was being tightly clenched by something. This aura, it was exactly the same as the hand at the bottom of Lingxiao College's Mountain of Wine and the eye in the Red Moon Desert. An extremely preposterous guess appeared in Chu Luiyue's mind. Perhaps a part of that person's incomplete divine body was also hidden here? She held her breath. Who would have thought that such a shocking secret was actually hidden under the plaza in front of the Phoenix Shrine? She suddenly turned around and looked at the Phoenix Shrine. Fortunately, the Phoenix Shrine was enveloped by a layer of barrier, and it did not seem to have suffered any damage. Grand, majestic, and solemn. As always. Chu Luiyue carried Dumpling and turned to leave. Mao Zhen hurriedly asked, "Where are you going?" Chu Luiyue said firmly, "Fenghuang Valley." Fenghuang Valley was not far from the Phoenix Shrine, and they quickly arrived. A gigantic barrier enveloped the entire area, and within it, one could vaguely see balls of light. Chu Luiyue was very familiar with this. When the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clansmen rested here, they would all enter their own balls of light. When she and Dumpling first came here, it was also like this. But at that time, there were not so many balls of light. But now, as far as the eye could see, there were at least 100. Dumpling looked at the scene in front of her in a daze. At this time, her tears were almost all gone. Are the remaining members of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan all here? Chu Luiyue muttered softly. Dumpling clenched the two feathers in her hands. One was the ancestor's golden feather, and the other was Zhao's feather. Hearing Chu Luiyue's words, Dumpling turned to look at her. They seem to have fallen asleep. Fallen asleep? Yes, they have fallen asleep. Dumpling used the back of her hand to rub the corners of her eyes. Her voice was still choked with sobs, but it was obvious that she was holding it in. Grandpa Clan leader made them fall asleep. Chu Luiyue's brows twitched slightly as she looked at the huge barrier that enveloped the entire Fenghuang Valley. If that's the case, then this barrier was also left behind by Senior Zhao. Tuanzi nodded hard and said, There were also a few grandpa elders who seemed to have helped. There were also a few other people's auras mixed in. Chu Luiwei was even more certain of her conjecture. It seemed that something had happened to the Divine Phoenix Mountain. Yi Zhao had used all his strength to protect the Divine Phoenix Hall and Fenghuang Valley, but he had disappeared with the thing buried under the plaza. Chu Luiwei was certain that Yi Zhao was still alive. Because if Yi Zhao died, Dumpling would automatically inherit the position of clan leader. The Divine Phoenix Hall would definitely sense it. But now, such a situation had not occurred. However, it would be extremely difficult to find Yi Zhao now. The barrier outside the Divine Phoenix Mountain should have been personally created by Senior Yi Zhao. This was the only way to protect the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan. Dumpling, can you detect where Senior Yi Zhao went? Chu Lu asked. Dumpling shook her head. Suddenly, she seemed to have thought of something and looked up hesitantly. At this moment, the sky was gradually darkening. A silver bridge gradually appeared at the point where the sky met the earth. It extended upwards bit by bit and was clearly longer than yesterday. Dumpling stared at the bridge. That feeling was getting stronger. Grandpa clan leader, is there? Chu Luiwei frowned. Could it be that Yi Zhao was also in the illusory god palace? On the other side, Rong Xiu was leading Yu Mo and the rest towards the meteor sect. Before they arrived, they saw a ball of fire from afar. The fire that covered the sky seemed to have swallowed everything. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 2185. The Meteor Sect was a first-rate aristocratic family in the Divine Ruins world. It had been passed down for thousands of years. It had a deep foundation and a huge influence. However, at this moment, the crazily burning sea of fire easily swallowed everything. Rong Xiu's sword-like eyebrows knitted together. At this moment, a group of black-armored soldiers flew over from the direction of the sea of fire. The totem of the Yuntian Tower was engraved on their collars. These people were Rong Xiu's Black Knights. Your Highness. Hundreds of soldiers saluted in unison. Rong Xiu asked, where are they? Your Highness, I rushed over immediately after receiving your order. However, I was still a step too late. When I arrived here, the fire had already started. Most of the people of the Meteor Sect had already died. Only 157 people survived. Now, I have arranged for them to stay 100 miles to the southwest. How are the head of the Shi clan and Shi Ru? The head of the Shi clan had already perished in order to protect his clansmen. The second miss of the Shi clan is fine now. She is just grieving and unwilling to speak. It would be hard for anyone to accept such a thing. Rong Xiu nodded. I will go and take a look. You don't have to follow me. The soldiers felt strange. However, they had always respected Rong Xiu's orders. Therefore, they didn't ask or dissuade him. They respectfully complied and waited in place. Although it was dangerous, His Highness's strength was unfathomable. Therefore, they didn't need to worry. Rong Xiu moved and arrived in the sky above the blazing fire. The houses had already been engulfed by the sea of fire. Only their vague outlines were left. The scorching heat caused the temperature of the surrounding air to rise by a lot. Even a river not far away was on the verge of drying up. Every inch of space was suffering from the terrifying heat. It was almost distorted. Rong Xiu looked down. A huge mirror slowly emerged from the endless flames. The flames danced crazily at the edges. However, they seemed to be afraid of the mirror. They didn't dare to approach it. Soon, a figure was reflected in the mirror. It was a face identical to Rong Xiu's. That person was dressed in a black robe and his gaze was deep and profound. Disdainful, cold, and noble. He looked at Rong Xiu and spoke slowly. You should go back. Patriarch, why don't you sit down and rest for a while? An old voice came from behind. Shi Ru shook his head and didn't say anything. He was still looking into the distance. This place was over 100 kilometers away, but they could still see the flames that soared into the sky. One could only imagine how bad the situation there had become. And they had just escaped from that hellish place. It used to be her home. Her father had already passed away, and she had accepted the order to officially inherit the position of the head of the family. Ever since she was young, she had always been groomed as the next patriarch. However, she had never imagined that she would stand in this position under such circumstances. Her eyes were red, but not a single tear fell from them. That fire had completely evaporated her tears. She didn't even have the strength to cry now. She was just standing there with the last of her willpower. The old man standing behind her felt sorry for her. After thinking for a while, he couldn't help but persuade her. "Patriarch, you have already done your best. If you hadn't sent that message for help, the people of the Yuntian Tower wouldn't have come. I'm afraid that now." Shiru was in a daze. Actually, she didn't have much hope at that time. After all, everything had happened too suddenly. The only thing she could think of at that time was to ask for help from the Peach Blossom Cove. Fortunately, the Yuntian Tower had come in time. Otherwise, the entire meteor sect would have been destroyed. At this moment, a tall figure was rapidly approaching from afar. It was Rong Xiu. Several black-armored soldiers of the Yuntian Tower followed behind him. The people behind Shiru stood up one after another. Shiru stepped forward and bowed solemnly. Her voice was choked with sobs. "Thank you for saving us, Saint." Rong Xiu said, "Now that the meteor sect has been destroyed, you can't go back. They will escort you all the way back to the Peach Blossom Cove. You will stay there for the time being. You are Er's friend. If she wants to save you, I will help you." Shiru took a deep breath. "The meteor sect will never be able to repay the kindness of the two of you." Rong Xiu nodded. He turned around and was about to leave. Shiru was startled. She hastily asked, "Saint, aren't you going back to the Peach Blossom Cove with us?" Rong Xiu didn't stop walking. "I have an important matter to take care of at the Yuntian Tower. I won't go back for the time being." Shiru was startled for a moment. Then she nodded. Rong Xiu was probably worried about the Yuntian Tower since such a thing had happened to the meteor sect. Therefore, it was normal for him to go back. Before she could say anything, Rong Xiu had already left with Umo looking at the figure that quickly disappeared into the distance. Shiru felt an inexplicable sense of unease. At this moment, the bridge on the horizon had quietly appeared. Shiru slowly clenched her fists. Phoenix God Mountain. After confirming that most of her clansmen had only fallen into a deep sleep, Dumpling's heart finally calmed down a little. It was just that finding Yizhao next was a huge problem. I wonder how Elder Yu and the others are doing now. Chu Liwei looked at Dumpling as she thought of this. "Dumpling, are they still at the Phoenix God Mountain?" "Yes." Dumpling nodded. She pointed at the Phoenix God Palace. Elder Yu and the others seemed to be inside. "But what?" Tuanzi bit her hand and said uncertainly, "I'm sorry. There seems to be one person missing." Chu Liu's heart skipped a beat. "Who's missing?" "Great Elder Gong." Chu Liu frowned. Yi Gong was already at odds with Dumpling. After Dumpling became the young master, Yi Gong suffered a huge blow and rarely came out. Why did he suddenly disappear now? In the dark and cramped cage, Lan Xiao was leaning against the wall with his legs crossed. His expression was still casual. "I say, you're really boring like this. We've already discussed it and even signed a contract. How can you tear it up unilaterally like this? You even locked yours truly and the others up? You don't really think that we'll listen to you just because you're locked up, do you?" He sneered and turned over. "It's been so long and you still haven't given up? How childish. Let me give you a piece of advice. I'm very hot-tempered. You can't control me. You'd better hurry up and let me out before I get angry." That low and hoarse voice finally sounded. "You guys have already broken the contract by tempering your divine body without permission. If you really want to talk about punishment, you guys should be the first." Lan Xiao chuckled, sat up, and smiled evilly. "Not only did I temper my divine body, but that Tianlei was also sent by you. Are you envious? Let me remind you what she sent over is a golden heavenly lightning." Wonderful Book House. Chapter 2186. Smith. A black whip suddenly flew up and ruthlessly lashed Lan Zhao's face. Dark red blood stains quickly appeared on his handsome and exquisite face. It was a ghastly sight. Lan Zhao reached out and wiped his face with his thumb. When he saw the blood stain, he cursed under his breath. "Damn you! Do you know how precious my face is?" He had waited for a full 10,000 years for this face to appear. If you continue to resist and struggle in vain, let alone your face, even your divine body will cease to exist. Lan Zhao sneered. "Sure. Then why don't you kill me now? On account of our past friendship, if you give me a quick death, I might be grateful to you in the underworld. When you go to the underworld in the future, I might even make things easier for you. Forget it. It's better if you don't dirty my underworld." Disgusting. As he spoke, Lan Zhao lay down again and placed his hands behind his head. He looked like he was waiting for death. However, the voice disappeared and no longer paid any attention to him. After a long while, Lan Zhao scoffed. Of course, he didn't dare to kill him. He didn't dare to kill any of them. However, this kind of life was really not meant for humans. Force flickered in his palm and quickly brushed across his face. That wound healed quickly. He had a divine body, so it was naturally more convenient to deal with it. "I'll remember this wound." He gritted his teeth and closed his eyes again. Phoenix God Mountain. Chu Luiwei was thinking about Yizhao when he suddenly heard Zichen's low and cold voice. "Master, look over there." Chu Luiwei heard him and looked in the direction he was pointing. The night was dark. The bridge at the edge of the sky was still extending upwards. In the clouds where the bridge disappeared, there seemed to be a few silver flowing lights flashing. Then more and more flowing lights surged out and intertwined with each other. They gathered together and gradually formed a huge silhouette. "That's..." Chu Luiwei squinted his eyes and looked carefully. Then his pupils constricted. It was a door. It floated quietly in the air, majestic, powerful, and unapproachable. "That's the Illusion God Palace's heavenly gate?" Zichen suddenly realized something and asked in a deep voice. Chu Luiwei didn't say anything. The reason for that was because there were even more rays of light gathering behind the door, forming the outline of a magnificent city. Behind the clouds, the legendary Illusory God Palace was faintly discernible. "Looks like the gate of heaven is really about to open." Once this commotion was made, it was unknown how many cultivators in the Divine Ruins world rushed over like ducks. Mao Zhen frowned. This was a huge temptation to all cultivators. Even if they knew that the road ahead was dangerous, they would still proceed without hesitation. "What do you plan to do next?" He looked at Chu Luiwei. Chu Luiwei hugged Dumpling tightly and said word by word, "To the Illusory God Palace." Chu Luiwei and the others left the divine Phoenix Mountain. Fortunately, Dumpling had the ancestor's golden feather, which made it convenient for them to enter and leave freely. After they left, they continued to freeze the barrier. Under such circumstances, this was undoubtedly the best choice. Everything that happened at the Divine Phoenix Mountain made Mao Zhen worried about Divine Dragon Island, so he didn't follow Chu Luiwei back to the Peach Blossom Cove. Instead, he returned to Divine Dragon Island. Chu Luiwei sped along. Along the way, he saw many cultivators heading straight for the bridge in the sky. The entire Divine Ruins seemed to be faintly restless. Chu Luiwei returned to the Peach Blossom Cove as quickly as possible. When he reached the city gate, he ran into Shiru and the others. Seeing Chu Luiwei, Shiru, who had been holding back for a long time, burst into tears again. However, she forced herself to hold it in, but her eyes were still filled with sadness. Chu Luiwei saw the sorry state of the group and guessed what had happened. She immediately walked over. "Greetings, Prince." The Black Knights bowed respectfully. Chu Luiwei nodded and motioned for them to rise. She looked around and realized that Rong Xiu wasn't here. "Where's the Holy Sun?" she asked. The leader of the soldiers immediately said, "Princess, the Holy Sun has something important to attend to," so he returned to the Yuntian Tower. Chu Luiwei was stunned. Did he say when he would be back? His Highness said that he would need some time, but he didn't say when he would be back. Chu Luiwei felt a little strange. Rong Xiu had rushed back. Did something really happen at the Yuntian Tower? However, she was afraid that the entire Divine Ruins world would be in chaos, and the Yuntian Tower wouldn't be spared either. She put away these thoughts and looked at Shuru. Come with me. The remaining people of the Meteor sect were quickly settled down. Hundreds of Black Knights from the Yuntian Tower were also left behind at the Yu residence, and were responsible for guarding this place. Chu Luiwei brought Shuru back and asked her in detail. Unfortunately, Shuru didn't know what had happened. I was cultivating at that time, but I suddenly heard the sound of fighting outside. I felt strange, so I went out to take a look. In the end, I saw that the people of the Meteor sect were killing each other. There weren't many people in the Meteor sect, and they had a good relationship with each other. They didn't have any life or death grudges. Therefore, I felt that something was wrong when I saw this. However, before I could catch those people and ask them about it, a big fire suddenly started in the ancestral hall. The fire spread very quickly, and the entire Meteor sect suffered disastrous casualties. We were only able to escape thanks to the Yuntian Tower's Black Knights. Otherwise, Shuru couldn't help but feel sorrowful as she recalled everything that had happened before. Chu Luiwei gently patted her hand, but he also knew that this kind of pain could not be comforted by others. She thought for a moment and frowned. Those people probably won't be able to find anything, but how did the fire start in the ancestral hall? Shuru shook her head. I don't know. When I rushed over, the sea of fire had already engulfed the entire ancestral hall. I could only vaguely see that the flames seemed to be gushing out from the ground of the ancestral hall. Underground? Chu Luiwei's nerves suddenly tightened. Shuru nodded. Seeing her reaction, he couldn't help but be stunned. What's wrong? Is there a problem? Chu Luiwei took a deep breath. I'm afraid there's a big problem. This situation was extremely similar to the situation at the Phoenix God Mountain. She pondered for a moment and said, I plan to go to the Illusory God Palace. Shuru was shocked. No? Chu Luiwei nodded and looked at the sky outside. At this moment, the sky was already bright. However, the bridge at the edge of the sky didn't disappear like before. The city had already disappeared, but the gate was still standing in the sky, shining brightly. Chu Luiwei took a deep breath. The Illusory God Palace's heavenly gate is about to open. It was waiting for her. Wonderful book house. Chapter 2187. Chu Luiwei called Sun Yi over to discuss the matter of heading to the Illusory God Palace together. This subordinate will naturally go with Master. Sun Yi didn't seem surprised by Chu Luiwei's decision. Or rather, from the moment that line of words flashed in the sky, he had already been prepared for it. Peach Blossom Dock can't be left alone. You should stay. Chu Luiwei was halfway through when he saw Sun Yi's expression. He swallowed the rest of his words. Forget it. Come with me. Who else does Master plan to bring with him to the 13U sect? Chu Luiwei pondered seriously for a moment. Sanson will be in charge of watching over Peach Blossom Dock. Wu Yao and Yu Jiao will stay behind to watch over the Dao Gate realm. 13 is too young, so he will stay as well. Alright, there's also Shifang. Let him continue to grow vegetables in the Yu residence. In that case, only Hua Shuang and Little Hachi would go with him. Tang Ku and Sir Su's identities are special. I'm afraid it won't be convenient. It's more appropriate to invite Taizu. There were many experts in Peach Blossom Dock, but this trip was dangerous and there were too many uncertainties. Chu Luiwei had to be very careful. After all, from the situation with the Meteor sect and Phoenix God Mountain, Peach Blossom Dock had to leave enough combat power to prevent any accidents. Sun Yi lowered his eyes slightly. A dark light seemed to flash through his indifferent and narrow eyes. Then he looked up and asked, Chanwanzhou, Master, do you want to bring him along? Chu Luiwei was stunned. Little Zhou? Sun Yi nodded. Although he's only a high god now, his strength is not bad and his potential is not small. This might be a rare opportunity for him. Chu Luiwei pondered for a moment. You're right. Then let's bring little Zhou along. She had seen little Zhou's combat power. Moreover, he had followed her for a long time. Most of the time, he naturally knew what to do without her saying anything. But, Tsin Yi, when did you become so close to little Zhou? Chu Luiyue sized up Tsin Yi strangely. Based on her understanding of Tsin Yi, other than the 13th Yu, he wasn't interested in anything else. Now, he actually took the initiative to mention Xiao Zhou's name. This was extremely rare. Tsin Yi's lips twitched as he smiled faintly. He's Master's man. If Master can trust him, then so can I. As long as it was convenient for her master, nothing else mattered. This was indeed the answer Tsin Yi gave. Chu Luiyue put away those chaotic thoughts. All right, it's settled then. Go inform them. I'll go find Taizu. They set off at night. I'll go with you. Shi Ruier suddenly stood up. Chu Luiyue shook his head. You're injured and need to recuperate. Moreover, your status is different now. So, the entire meteor sect still needs to rely on you. Shi Ruier's expression immediately changed when she heard this. She pursed her lips tightly. After a long time, she said, All right, I'll listen to you. If there's anything you need, I and the entire meteor sect will definitely do it. Chu Luiyue patted her shoulder lightly before turning around and leaving. Soon it was night time. That silver bridge was especially bright and resplendent in the night sky. As expected, the silhouette of that city appeared once again. Moreover, it was even clearer than the previous day. Before they set off, Chu Luiyue arrived at the Dao realm. Today, Yu Jiao was in charge of guarding this place. She already knew that Chu Luiyue and the rest were planning to head to the illusory god palace. Therefore, she felt strange when she saw her here. Master, why are you here? Chu Luiyue shook his head. It's nothing. I'm just worried that something might happen to this Dao realm, so I came to take a look. Yu Jiao hugged the wooden sword in her arms and smiled. Don't worry. During this period of time, this Dao realm has been very stable. Although it still can't be passed through, it's much better than before when the situation was getting worse. Chu Luiyue walked to the front of the barrier and stared at it. Above the Dao realm, the light flickered and remained calm. She stood there quietly as if she was waiting for something. She was waiting for the scene from that day to appear again. However, after waiting for a long time, the scene she expected did not appear. That mirror did not appear above the Dao realm, nor did it reflect her figure. Master? Seeing that Chu Luiyue stood there for a long time without any reaction, Yu Jiao called out. Chu Luiyue came back to her senses. She felt a little regretful. I guess I won't be able to see it today, she exhaled softly and turned to leave. Guard it well. The night wind was cold. Under the starry sky, Chu Luiyue and the others rushed toward the bridge. Chu Luiyue originally wanted to go with Rong Xiu, but Rong Xiu had returned to the Yuntian Tower and did not know when he would return. She had Yan Qing pass the message and led the others there first. In fact, the same scene was playing out in the entire Divine Ruins world. Countless cultivators, with all kinds of thoughts, rushed toward the rumored illusory god palace. In the vast sky, there were no stars and no moon. Only the gradually revealed appearance of the huge city attracted everyone's attention. It seemed to have existed here since ancient times. It was incomparably noble and unmoving. And that bridge was the only existence that people could touch. Whether or not they could ascend to the heavens and enter when the heaven gate opened became everyone's hope. The bridge was very far away from them. Even though Chu Luiyue and the others traveled at full speed, it took them half a month to reach it. Looking from afar, it was a sea. The silver bridge grew from the sea and extended toward the sky, connecting with the magnificent city. Countless rays of light scattered down. It was brilliant. Wonderful book house. Chapter 2188. At this moment, countless cultivators had gathered on the shore. They all looked up with unconcealable eagerness and anticipation in their eyes. Chu Luiyue's arrival caused a commotion among the crowd. That person from Peach Blossom Dock is here. I heard that Senior Tang Ku and Mr. Su forged nearly 100 venerable divine artifacts together and gave them all to Peach Blossom Dock as gifts. I wonder what kind of scene that is. I've long heard of Shangguan Yu's fame, but I didn't expect to meet her here. What's so strange about that? The illusion god palace's heaven gate is about to open, and countless cultivators are rushing here to enter. She's no exception. But isn't that person from Yuntian Tower always with her? Why isn't she here this time? Shang Guanyu seems to be very confident in herself since she only brought so few people here. However, the illusory god palace isn't a place that just anyone can enter. Everyone was discussing. During this period of time, Chu Liwei could be said to be extremely famous in the Divine Ruins world. Thus, everyone was inevitably filled with curiosity and probing about her. Chu Liwei didn't care about the various gazes and voices around her. She focused her gaze in front of her. The bluish-black seawater was churning, and the waves kept crashing against the rocks, splashing water everywhere. What was different from other sea regions was that the seawater here contained an extremely abundant amount of energy. Even though they were just standing on the shore, they could still feel the pressure that was hard to ignore. There was nothing on the surface of the sea other than the silver bridge. There's no sign of life here at all. Shengguan Jing frowned and said in a low voice. Other than them, this place seemed to be too quiet. Only the sound of the waves kept echoing in their ears. Chu Liwei stared at the mysterious sea and said softly, "The seawater is too rich. The energy in the seawater is too abundant. Naturally, no living creatures will approach it." "Master, what's the reason for that?" Little Hachi blinked and came over curiously. "Isn't it better for cultivation if there's more energy?" Chu Liuyue's lips curled up. "Generally speaking, that's true. However, the prerequisite was that the body had to be able to withstand the irrigation and erosion of these powers. If he couldn't control it, it would only do more harm than good. Previously, in the palace in the Red Moon Desert, such a problem had occurred." "I see." Little Hachi nodded and rested her chin on her hand. "However, this place is indeed very strange. There is so much heaven and earth energy here, but it doesn't spread outwards. It only fills this place. It's as if there's an invisible barrier that's sealing everything." Chu Liwei looked at the silver bridge thoughtfully. Right at this moment, the sound of a bell suddenly came from the sky. Boom! The distant and boundless sound of the bell reverberated throughout the world. Everyone's heart trembled. "The gate of heaven is opening." Someone in the crowd shouted, but it was not difficult to hear the suppressed excitement in the voice. "Do we have to cross that bridge? Then we'll have to cross the sea first and reach that bridge. This sea is a little strange. Won't it be dangerous?" "If it's dangerous, we'll just have to be careful. We can't possibly give up eating for fear of choking and just watch, right?" Although they knew that the road ahead was dangerous, it could not erase the yearning in their hearts. "This old man will go first." A black-robed elder stroked his beard and took the lead. Chu Liwei glanced at him. She did not recognize that elder, but from his aura, there was no doubt that he was a venerable god expert. At a time like this, a venerable god expert would indeed be more confident. Everyone focused their gazes on him. The black-robed elder came to the shore and waved his hand, setting up a crimson barrier around him. Then, with a tap of his foot, he quickly headed toward the silver bridge in the center of the sea. Wherever he passed, ripples would appear on the surface of the sea. Then, everyone saw that the elder's speed had clearly slowed down. The rich heaven and earth energy was like a swamp, slowing down his pace. The black-robed elder was shocked. He felt as if a mountain was pressing down on him, so heavy that he almost could not breathe. He quickly circulated the origin power in his body, barely keeping his body from falling. Even so, he was still slowed down by a lot. He was only halfway there, but the energy in his body was already exhausted at an alarming rate. When he finally arrived in front of the silver bridge, his forehead was already covered in sweat. Only when he stepped onto the silver bridge did he feel the pressure on his body instantly lessen. Phew! He let out a long breath and stood there for a long while before recovering. When he looked back, he still felt some lingering fear. If he had been a little later, he really might not have been able to hold on and would have fallen into the sea. He looked at the people standing on the shore and said with lingering fear, "I'm afraid that only venerable gods can barely pass through this sea. Those below venerable gods should just give up." Everyone looked at each other when they heard that. Many of those who came here were venerable gods, but the proportion of high gods was definitely not small either. How could the high gods here be willing to give up just because of this? Is he just trying to fool us? We're just flying over this sea. How can he be so exaggerated? That's right. This distance isn't that far. Why is it that only venerable gods can pass through? Isn't that a little too exaggerated? But he doesn't look like he's lying. No matter what, we shouldn't believe anyone's words at a time like this, okay? For a moment, there were differing opinions. Rather than saying that they did not believe the black-robed elder, it was more accurate to say that they were unwilling to give up just like that. They had gone through so much trouble to get here. How could they just leave after listening to someone else's words? Seeing everyone's reaction, the black-robed elder felt stifled and waved his sleeves. That's all I have to say. Believe it or not, it's up to you. You're courting death. If anything happens later, don't blame me for not warning you. Many people hesitated for a while, but in the end, they still chose to go forward. If we go together, we might be able to support each other. Perhaps we can pass through smoothly. That makes sense. Then we'll just follow behind them. A few moments later, Chu Luiyue saw 3 people holding hands as they walked forward. Of these 3, one was a venerable god while the other 2 were high gods. All of them looked rather young. It was no wonder they were so arrogant. The 3 of them walked forward smugly, but they soon realized how serious the situation was. Layers upon layers of pressure were surging in from all sides, almost crushing them. The energy in their bodies was rapidly being consumed, but even so, they found it difficult to move forward. When they were 1/3 of the way through, one of them couldn't hold on any longer and fell into the sea. But, wonderful book house. Chapter 2189. That person fell into the water and disappeared into the sea. The 2 people above looked down and were about to try to retrieve that person when suddenly, their eyes widened in shock. The body of the person who had just fallen had already been minced into pieces by the astonishing power in the sea. A smear of blood slowly spread, and the thick smell of blood rushed into their nostrils. The remaining pieces of flesh and blood rushed to the surface of the sea and were quickly drowned by the waves. All of this happened in the blink of an eye. From beginning to end, that person did not even have time to call for help before he was completely swallowed and died. Seeing this scene, everyone felt a chill run down their backs. The sea, plop. Another person could not hold on and fell. This time, only the god was left in the group of 3 in the blink of an eye. However, his current situation was not optimistic. The 2 people beside him fell one after another and died in front of his eyes, which was a huge blow to him. He was dazed for a moment, took a deep breath, and coughed because of the thick smell of blood. This finally made him come back to his senses, and he quickly fled without thinking. He ran madly in the direction of the silver bridge. The origin power in his body burned wildly, and his face was pale and his whole body was in pain. However, he could not care about anything else at this time. He only knew that he could rush forward as fast as he could. Finally, before he ran out of energy, he arrived at the silver bridge. As soon as he stepped on it, his body went weak and he staggered, almost falling to the ground. The black-robed elder who came first saw this and frowned. "Now, you still don't believe this old man's words?" Everyone fell silent. They had all seen the tragic scene just now. It was already difficult for a god to cross by himself, let alone bring others. However, if that was the case, wouldn't many of them really have to stop here? The gate of heaven is about to open, and everyone wants to go to the illusory god palace, but it's not that easy. The strong are respected, and if you don't have enough strength, you're just courting death. The black-robed elder's words were like a bucket of cold water poured over everyone's heads. Although it was unpleasant to hear, it was the truth. Those 2 gods were quite strong, but what happened in the end? All of them fell into the sea and were completely annihilated. Not even a complete corpse was left behind. Could it be that only venerables can enter the illusory god palace? Someone muttered in a low voice. His voice was filled with disappointment and defeat. Sheng Guanjing looked at Chu Luiyue and asked hesitantly, Little Yu, what do you think we should do now? There were a total of 6 of them. He, Chu Luiyue, and Sun Yi were all honored gods. The remaining 3 were only high gods. Chu Luiyue said, "Let's go together." Together? Shengguan Jing frowned. She had clearly seen the situation just now. It was impossible for her not to know how dangerous it was to do so. But she was still so insistent. Little girl, you, why don't you think about it again? The road ahead is dangerous. If we advance recklessly, I'm afraid. Taizu, don't worry. I know what to do. I won't gamble with Shuang and the others' lives. Chu Liuyue's voice was very soft, but her tone was very firm. Many people around them heard their conversation and turned to look at them. They looked at Chu Liuyue as if they were looking at a stubborn lunatic. What did Shengguan Jing just say? All of them? Did she make a mistake? Half of them are only high gods. I've heard that she's very bold. Now that I've met her today, she really lives up to her reputation. Where did she get her confidence from? I'd like to see how she's going to bring those people over safely. There was no lack of people in the crowd who wanted to see a joke. Seeing Chu Liuyue's insistence, Shengguan Jing could only agree. Then be careful. Chu Liuyue nodded. She tapped the tip of her foot lightly, and her slender and delicate figure instantly flew up and landed on the surface of the sea. Boundless pressure instantly surged in from all directions, enveloping her completely. Almost at the same time, turbulent force surged out of Chu Liuyue's dantian and filled every yuan meridian around her. A layer of beautiful soft armor covered her body and flickered with a faint glow. The 2 forces inside and outside her body clashed with each other and instantly cancelled out a lot of the pressure. Moreover, she had summoned her godly body, which greatly reduced the impact on her body. After a series of actions, she easily resolved the problem of the terrifying pressure around her. The only troublesome thing was that it consumed a terrifying amount of force. However, coincidentally, this was what she lacked the most. Chu Liuyue continuously urged the force in her body to surge out. To others, this place might be extremely dangerous, but to her, it was really nothing. Shuang. Chu Liuyue turned around and shouted at the people who were still standing on the shore. Hua Shuang reacted quickly and immediately responded. Before he finished speaking, he was already charging toward Chu Liuyue. Like the others before him, he slowed down the moment he stepped onto the sea. At this moment, a silver-red flowing light surged out from Chu Liuyue's body and drew a brilliant rainbow under the dark sky. Divine territory? Seeing this scene, the 2 venerated gods standing on the silver bridge could not help but exclaim in shock. The 2 of them looked at each other and saw the shock in each other's eyes. Others might not know, but the 2 of them knew best. On the surface of the sea, the pressure was heavy. It was already extremely difficult to pass through, let alone anything else. In any case, the 2 of them had been completely suppressed earlier and could not summon their own divine territories. However, Chu Liuyue seemed to be very relaxed. The silver-red divine territory surged like a river and reached Hua Shuang in the blink of an eye. With this divine territory, Hua Shuang's movements became much more convenient. His figure flashed, and he quickly moved forward along the god domain. Chu Liuyue's divine territory covered almost half of the sea. Hua Shuang did not take long to reach the silver bridge from the shore. Finally, with a leap, he landed firmly on the silver bridge. Everyone was dumbfounded by what they saw. Is this possible? Is this possible? Little Hachi! Chu Liuyue shouted again. Little Hachi tucked her hair behind her ears and walked forward, twisting her slender waist. As she walked, she waved her hand at the person who had made sarcastic remarks just now and chuckled. Just now, you said that you wanted to see what our master would do, right? Now you have to watch carefully. After all, this is an opportunity that you can only watch. As she spoke, she flew up and followed Hua Shuang's path. It did not take much effort for her to reach Hua Shuang's side. Oh, it's so crowded here. Little Hachi covered her mouth and smiled. I'll have to trouble the 2 seniors to move over there. There are still quite a few people behind us. Wonderful book house. Chapter 2190. The eyes of the two venerable gods who were the first to arrive twitched. Why do these words sound so infuriating? However, little Hachi was enchanting and beautiful, and she smiled sweetly. They could not throw a tantrum at a young lady, so they could only walk stiffly to the side. Thank you, seniors. Little Hachi's smile deepened as she yawned. Hey, second brother, don't you think it's boring? Hua Shuang knew that she had always been the most vengeful. She must have been angered by those people's mockery just now, so she deliberately angered them. He gently knocked little Hachi's forehead. You've been spoiled by your master. Little Hachi snorted. Hua Shuang continued to comfort her. Why don't we guess who can come over? Isn't this a little interesting? Little Eighth was instantly energized and nudged him with his elbow. His brows relaxed as he smiled. Second brother, I haven't seen you in a few years, but you haven't changed at all. Yes, I still like to watch shows like before. I like it too. Look at those people's expressions. It's really exciting. Just now, they were all waiting to add insult to injury, but now, they're all stunned on the spot and can't say a word, right? There aren't many opportunities to slap people in the face, so I have to seize it. Hua Shuang said seriously. I'm also worried that everyone can't come over. After all, it's not easy to come here, right? If we can only watch others pass by, wouldn't it be very uncomfortable? The two of them echoed each other, making the group of people so angry that their faces turned green. However, the truth was right in front of them. Chu Luiwei had indeed sent them all over easily. Even if they wanted to refute, they could not find anything to say. Amidst the strange silence, Chang Wanzhou quickly arrived. Finally, Sun Yi and Sheng Guanjing arrived. After they arrived at the Silver Bridge, Chu Luiwei moved his wrist and planned to put away the god realm. At that moment, a voice suddenly came from the crowd. Master, you wait. Chu Luiwei turned around. The person who spoke was a middle-aged man. Master Yu, we have a presumptuous request. Since it's a presumptuous request, there's no need to say it. Chu Luiwei interrupted the other party and quickly put away his divine territory. With a single step, he arrived on the Silver Bridge. Everyone was speechless. The middle-aged man's face instantly turned into the color of a pig's liver. He was extremely embarrassed. However, he still refused to give up. He gritted his teeth and continued. Master Yu, we just want to ask you for a favor. As long as you can help us cross the sea, we will reward you handsomely. Chu Luiwei looked at him strangely. Heavy reward? How heavy is it? The man choked instantly. In the Divine Ruins world, who didn't know that Chu Luiwei was rich? There was a large group of divine beasts, a large pile of venerable divine artifacts, and all kinds of precious heavenly treasures. What did she lack? What could possibly catch her eye? Perhaps it was because he was questioned by Chu Luiwei in front of so many people, the man felt a little embarrassed. His expression became a little unsightly. To Master Yu, this is just a piece of cake. Even so, Master Yu is still unwilling to help? Chu Luiwei was stunned for a moment before he chuckled softly. Little Hachi blinked and said coquettishly, Master, so there really is such a shameless person in this world? He's not related to me at all, yet he has the cheek to ask me for help like this? TSK, what a big face. Most importantly, he's very ugly. That's even uglier. The man's expression instantly turned even uglier. Wonderful book house. Chapter 2191. Let's not talk about whether this is a piece of cake for me. Even if it is, it has nothing to do with you, does it? Little Hachi and the others are my people, so of course I have to take them with me. As for you, if you're willing to return to Peach Blossom Cove and call me Master for the rest of your life, I can consider it. Chu Luiwei said slowly. These words were like a resounding slap to the man's face. Sheng Guanyu, don't go overboard. If you don't want to help, just say so. What's the point of insulting me like that? Chu Luiwei was surprised. I thought I made myself very clear, but you didn't understand. But you don't seem to understand, so I can only be more straightforward. In the end, he was the one who brought this humiliation upon himself. Who else could he blame? The man's expression changed. He was furious. Fine. If you're so capable, wait until the divine gate opens. Let's see if you can still have the last laugh. Chu Luiyue looked away lazily. You don't have to worry about that. If you have the time and energy, you'd better think about how to get over. That one sentence finally blocked the rest of the man's words. As for the others present, they looked at each other and secretly exchanged glances. Chu Luiyue was clearly not going to help, so they had to think of another way. That was normal. Everyone was here to compete with each other. It was good enough that they could take care of their own people. Who would want to help others for no reason? Chu Luiyue could easily bring her subordinates over because she had the ability. What right did others have to ask her to help? After a brief silence, the remaining people finally tried to cross the sea and reach the Silver Bridge. Her Eminence was able to make it, but none of the great gods were able to make it over safely. Although there was only a difference of one word between the two, there was a huge gap between their strengths. It was like a natural chasm that was difficult to cross. After another 7 great gods died in the sea, the remaining great gods finally gave up. In the end, only 23 high deities made it onto the bridge. The middle-aged man who wanted Chu Luiyue's help was among them, but the rest of the people who came with him stayed on the shore. Including Chu Luiyue and the others who had arrived earlier, there were a total of 31 people. Among these people, Hua Shuang and the other 2 were the only high gods. In this way, the 3 of them became rather special existences. However, under the protection of Chu Luiyue and the others, the remaining people could not express anything. The middle-aged man stared at Chu Luiyue with a cold look in his eyes. Little Hachi moved closer to Chu Luiyue and said in a low voice, "Master, I think that person already hates us. I'm afraid that he will think of ways to make things difficult for us." Chu Luiyue shook his head. "Ignore him." She had always been sharp, so she naturally sensed the other party's hostility. However, she did not take this seriously. If she was worried about this, she would not have acted like that just now. She did not take the initiative to cause trouble, but she was also not afraid of trouble. Little Hachi saw that she was staring at the silver bridge under her feet with great concentration. She also tilted her head and looked at it a few times, but unfortunately, she did not see anything. "Master, what's so interesting about this bridge? Have you been looking at it since you came up?" Chu Luiyue said. "Look at the patterns on it." "Patterns?" Little Adie's brows furrowed slightly. She saw that there were only some flickering light spots on it, but there were no patterns. Chu Luiyue bent down, stretched out a finger, and lightly tapped on one of the light spots. Bang! A slight cracking sound could be heard. The palm-sized light spot suddenly spread out, and light scattered in all directions. In the blink of an eye, it condensed into a small Xian formation. The pattern was complicated and dazzling. Most importantly, this was a great Xian Emperor Master-level Xian formation. Chu Luiyue's pupils shrank. She had already felt that there was something wrong with this light spot, but she did not expect that such an inconspicuous little light spot was actually a Xian formation of this level. After a moment, that Xian formation closed up again, and the light scattered, returning to that blurry light spot. It did not seem to be a threat at all. If they did not see it with their own eyes, no one would believe what had just happened. Just now, that was a great Xian Emperor Master-level Xian formation? When Chu Luiyue moved, the people at the side were more or less paying attention to her, so they all saw the scene. At that moment, everyone was shocked. Chu Luiyue stood up and looked forward. At this moment, they were standing at the bottom of this silver bridge. Going up, countless light spots gathered, condensing into this peculiar bridge. The light spots flickered, and there were almost countless of them. If these were all Xian formations, Chu Luiyue held her breath. She originally thought that the flowing cloud flying diagram, which had accumulated over 1,000 Xian formations, was already an extremely powerful existence. However, at this moment, compared to this silver bridge that extended from the sea to the sky, it was simply a small magician in the presence of a great magician. No, it could even be said that there was no comparison at all. It was hard to imagine what kind of shocking scene it would be if all these light spots bloomed at the same time and all the Xian formations operated at the same time. No wonder this place has such astonishing heaven and earth energy, Chu Liwei muttered softly. The black-robed elder who was the first to arrive let out a long sigh. So many Xian formations gathered to form a bridge that leads to the sky. I really wonder what kind of existence the illusory god palace at the end of the bridge is. Actually, this was also what everyone was thinking. Just this bridge alone was already incomparably shocking. As for that mysterious illusory god palace, it was probably even more. Dong. Another sound of the bell rang out. Some people could no longer hold back and walked up. Once one person took the lead, the rest would quickly follow. Everyone walked up the bridge one after another, heading straight for the door in the sky. Chu Liwei was about to walk forward when she suddenly caught a glimpse of Chang Wanzhou from the corner of her eyes. His brows were tightly knitted, and his expression seemed to be somewhat painful. "Little Zhou, what's wrong?" Chu Liu asked. Chang Wanzhou raised his head and looked over, shaking his head. "I'm fine. It's just that just now I felt a little dizzy." Chu Liu's brows slightly furrowed. "Is it serious?" This didn't seem to be the first time this had happened. Recently, Chang Wanzhou seemed to be prone to headaches and dizziness. This had almost never happened before. Chu Liuwe couldn't help but feel a little worried. Chang Wanzhou pursed his lips. "I'm fine." Chu Liuwe helped him take his pulse and found that his body was indeed normal. "Maybe it's because I haven't rested well recently." Chang Wanzhou retracted his hand. "These few days I've been having some messy dreams." Chu Liuwe nodded. "If you feel uncomfortable, feel free to tell me." Chang Wanzhou responded. At this moment, they were already at the back. The people in front had already walked some distance. Chu Liuwe raised his chin. "Let's go." Wonderful Book House. Chapter 2192. Another bell chime was heard. It was getting closer and closer to the opening of the gate of heaven. At first, there were still some whispers in the crowd, but the closer they got, the more tense the atmosphere became. They gradually quieted down. Finally, everyone moved forward in silence. Only the excitement and anticipation in their eyes showed that they were not as calm as they looked. Chu Liuwe moved forward step by step. She could clearly hear the sound of her heart beating, and the blood in her body seemed to be flowing faster. Blood was gurgling under her eardrums. She faintly felt that something was about to rush out from her dantian. But every time she wanted to observe it carefully, that inexplicable throbbing would disappear. This made the whole process extremely long. Every once in a while, the bell would ring. "Don't." "The 10th bell," Shengguan Jing said in a low voice. At this moment, they were only a short distance away from the gate. Chu Liuwe nodded lightly. She had a feeling that perhaps, when the 12th bell rang, the gate of heaven would open. There were already people in front of the gate and stopped. When the 11th bell rang, Chu Liuwe and the others also came to the gate. She stood behind the crowd and looked at the gate in front of her. This gate was extremely tall, and people standing here seemed extremely small. Countless streams of light intertwined, outlining its outline, but its specific appearance could not be seen clearly. A thin layer of clouds covered it, and no one could see through it. However, the crowd was able to clearly sense that heavy and imposing aura. This reminded Chu Liuwe of the palace in the Red Moon Desert. She wondered what it had to do with the illusory god palace. After a long wait, the 12th bell finally rang. This bell was heavy and distant, and it spread far and wide between heaven and earth. Then, the gate finally opened slowly. Creak! Everyone's spirits were lifted as they focused their gazes on that direction. Brilliant golden light shone, almost blinding them. Chu Liuwe tilted her head and narrowed her eyes. After a while, the light gradually dissipated. A man in his 30s, dressed in a gray robe, walked out of the door. As soon as he appeared, Chu Liu's heart trembled. This man's aura was extremely strong. He was much stronger than all the primordial gods she had seen before. He was probably only one step away from the rumored threshold. She glanced quickly at the man again. He had a tall and straight figure and a handsome face. There was a faint arrogance in his eyes. He stood in front of the door, his scrutinizing and imposing gaze sweeping across everyone. He spoke in a low voice, and his voice was clear yet carried an indescribable pressure. The Mirage God Palace's heavenly gate opens once every 10,000 years to recruit the best cultivators in the world to ascend to the heavens and break through the gods. You are the first batch to arrive at the opening of the heavenly gate. It can be seen that your aptitudes are not bad. Everyone was excited, but they still held their breaths in concentration, not daring to slack off in the slightest. I am Jinyun Lai, the seventh divine envoy of the illusory God Palace. I am in charge of leading you into the illusory God Palace. You will follow the order and enter the book one by one. Saying so, he raised his hand, and a thick book appeared in his palm. Then he opened the book, and his other hand flashed with light, summoning a crimson gold feather pen. When she saw the feather in his hand, Chu Liyue's heart tensed up. That was the feather of the crimson gold heavenly phoenix. Ayu, I want to go out. Ayu. Tuanzi also sensed the breath and immediately wanted to come out. Chu Liyue comforted her in her mind. Dumpling, don't worry, wait until we enter the heavenly gate. It won't be too late to check then. There can't be any mistakes right now. Hearing her say that, Dumpling finally calmed down. Then you must take a good look and see if that is Grandpa Patriarch's feather. Chu Liyue nodded without batting an eyelid. Luckily, this small disturbance didn't attract that person's attention. The people standing in front had already started to step forward. Jinyun Lai held the book in one hand and a pen in the other, asking in a deep voice. Song Qing. The first to step forward was the black-robed elder who was the first to step on the silver bridge. Even though he had seen many storms, he still couldn't hide his excitement at this moment. Jinyun Lai raised her hand and used the crimson gold feather to gently sweep it between Song Qing's eyebrows. Song Qing felt as if there was an eye that was looking at him from the inside out. The force in his body surged, and a pattern appeared between his eyebrows. That was the totem of his bloodline power. Jinyun Lai nodded and wrote his name on the book. Pass. Song Qing was originally a bit nervous, but he didn't think that he would pass the inspection so smoothly. He was happy and immediately responded. Thank you, Divine Envoy Jin. In the Illusion God Palace, the title of Divine Envoy is the highest honor. There is no need to use a name. You can just call me the seventh Divine Envoy. Jinyun Lai said indifferently. Song Qing's heart skipped a beat, and he quickly bowed. Seeing that Jinyun Lai wasn't angry, he relaxed and stepped through the heaven gate. When the crowd saw this scene, they were all extremely envious. The second person tried his best to restrain his excitement and walked forward. The process was the same as before. After he reported his name, Jinyun Lai swept the feather between his eyebrows again. There were a total of 31 people who came here, and Jinyun Lai's inspection speed was extremely fast. Soon more than half of them had gone through. Soon, it was the middle-aged man who asked Chu Liyue for help but was rejected. With a face full of eagerness, he bowed his head and said respectfully, "This one is Cheng Pei, greetings to the seventh divine envoy. This one has admired the Illusion God Palace for a long time. Today, don't talk so much nonsense." Jinyun Lai's face showed some impatience, and her voice carried a warning. In the Illusion God Palace, strength is everything. Everything else is false, understand? Many of the onlookers looked at him with ridicule. He wanted to flatter, but he hit the nail on the head. Don't you know where you are? Cheng Pei's face turned pale. Only then did he realize what a stupid thing he had done. He quickly said, I understand. Jinyun Lai swept the feather between his eyebrows and said coldly. Cheng Pei walked over with his legs shaking. It took him a while to recover. Soon, everyone was finished with the inspection, and only 6 people, including Chu Liyue, were left. Sheng Guanjing followed him and passed smoothly. Chu Liyue walked forward. Sheng Guanyu. Jinyun Lai glanced at her and raised her eyebrows. You've become a supreme god at such a young age. Thank you for the compliment, seventh divine envoy. Chu Luiyue replied in a neither servile nor overbearing manner. Jin Yunlai nodded in satisfaction, then swept the feather between Chu Luiyue's eyebrows. Then his face turned serious. Chu Luiyue's eyebrows were as smooth as before. There was no sign of a totem. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Immortal Journey YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.